I would like to tell you about my mother, Lillian Isabel Ferguson. She was known as Isabel, or Izzy, or in the war years, Fergie. My mother was strong, a hard worker, a good friend, but above all, a proud prairie woman who was deeply connected to the land. I will tell her story in two parts. Part 1 will examine her early life on a small farm in Saskatchewan. Part 2 will be about her city life in Regina. Part 1, Farm Girl. In order to tell about Isabel's life, I must start by telling you about her parents, Humble and Mary Ferguson. My grandmother, Mary Lazurko, came from a Ukrainian family. Many Ukrainian people settled on the prairie provinces of Canada because of their farming skills and their ability to survive a harsh climate. My grandfather, Humble Ferguson, was one of 5 children born to Jean and John Ferguson. Because of John's family connections to the Orkney Isles of Scotland, they settled in Saskatchewan within a community of families from the Orkneys. One harvest time, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1919, the Lazurko family headed into Yorkton to sell the potatoes they'd grown. It so happened the Fergusons were also in town that day. As Mary's family were traveling down the road with their horse and cart, suddenly there was an accident. Potatoes went tumbling and spilling everywhere. The Scots stood there laughing at the bohunks as they scrambled to pick up the potatoes. All the Scots made fun, except for Humble. He bent down to gather up the precious crop. In the process, he met Mary and fell head over heels. Humble was 29 years older than Mary, who was only 17, but he was smitten. They courted and were married in 1920. Neither family was very happy about the union. Mary's father, a stern, devout member of the Ukrainian Orthodox Catholic Church, was very upset. It was intolerable that his daughter would marry a Scottish man and a Presbyterian to boot. Mary was disowned and did not see her family again. Life in the Scottish community must have been lonely and hard at first. However, Mary had an extremely sweet personality and soon warmed the hearts of many. They had 4 children. Bill was born in 1921, Isabel in 1923, Bob in 1925, and Mary in 1927. Then tragedy struck. Mary was diagnosed with a brain tumor. She died in 1928. Humble was left with 4 children under the age of 8. The Scottish community rallied around my grandfather. Bill stayed with Humble on the farm. The other children were too young to be without a mother's care, so they were sent to live with friends and family. Isabel grew up in the home of Humble's cousin, Bill Wiseman. Even though Bill and his wife, who my mum always referred to as Ma Wiseman, had 8 children of their own, they opened up their home to one more little girl. Isabel grew up learning about the hard work involved in running a farm. She rode a horse-drawn buggy to the Orkney school and went to church on Sundays at the Orkney church. The first Scottish pioneers to the area built the stone buildings in the 1890s. The church and school still stand today and have been turned into museums to commemorate those pioneer days. Mum would love to tell stories of the gardens she would tend as a young girl and how, as a child, she would help to cook for the farm hands at harvest time. She would work from before dawn to sunset, baking bread and preparing 3 huge meals a day for the threshing gangs that would travel from farm to farm. I remember her telling the stories of baking dozens of pies and having to watch out when setting them out to cool because a farmhand would grab a pie and gobble it down in a few bites. During the Great Depression, when times were very hard, they were better off on the farm than folks in town because they always had food to eat. Humble's brother William, Uncle Billy, had his own farmstead. He was a bachelor and worked hard to create a good life for himself. He cooked his own meals and did his own canning. During the dirty 30s, he was known for never turning away the hungry drifters who would show up at his door looking for a meal. Uncle Billy was very fond of my mother. He called her Isabel. When he died, he left his farm to her. I had the great opportunity to experience Saskatchewan farm life when I was a kid because we would spend our summers on that farm, living on his homestead, eating the apples from the trees he planted, helping to tend the large garden my mother would plant, and marveling at the gigantic blue spruce trees he carefully put into the ground as seedlings, helped me understand a tiny bit about what it must have been like to live in those pioneer times in Saskatchewan. Spending our summers at Uncle Billy's farm was something my mother looked forward to every year. She loved reliving every aspect of farm life and sharing it with her children.